Some individuals don't detest others. They simply struggle to endure a crowd's clamor, the babble, the mirth, the perpetual demand to act. They are often seen fabricating reasons before an event, pausing before accepting a social request, gazing at their reflection, wondering why a basic thing like socializing feels like a grueling emotional test. They aren't aloof or haughty or reclusive. They just experience existence in another way. The mindset of those shunning social functions isn't rooted in timidity or apathy. It's about self-preservation. It's about the silent conflict linking contact and ease between desiring inclusion and requiring space. Understand, for certain individuals, social functions don't replenish them. They exhaust them. Each discussion seems like one more process running in their mind, each grin one more facade. It isn't a lack of concern. It is an excess of it. They sense tonal variations, fleeting facial movements, energetic fluctuations. They perceive when a person forces mirth or conceals unease. Their brains are configured for profound insight, and that type of sensitivity has a price: sensory overload. Social nervousness isn't invariably dread. At times, it's emotional depletion masked as retreat. Experts have extensively discussed introversion, but what we frequently overlook is that introversion isn't a lack of social longing, it's the deep need for significant interaction. Individuals who shun social gatherings aren't dodging other humans. They're dodging the shallowness that frequently comes with big crowds. Their nervous systems flourish on authenticity. When they state, "I'd prefer remaining home," it isn't indolence, it's emotional self-care. They require silence, not from a distaste for others, but because silence is where they find their center. There's a profoundly psychological reason also for why social functions can seem oppressive. Every collective environment unconsciously activates an ancient process in our mind, the drive for communal security. We developed to endure in clans, and being excluded historically meant actual demise. Thus, even now, when you enter a space full of individuals, your system still searches for validation. Do I belong here? Am I being criticized? For people highly sensitive to emotional subtleties, this assessment procedure is continuous. The brain continues analyzing, contrasting, assessing. No surprise, it seems simpler to remain in. Yet, this is the contradiction. A lot of the very individuals who shun social functions frequently desire profound bonds the most. They wish for comprehension, but not overwhelming. They seek closeness without vulnerability. They desire conversation, but just when language means something. They desire mirth, but not in the resonance of trivial chatter. This is the silent suffering of the socially withdrawn, the strain between solitude and genuineness. Because it isn't solitude they dread, it's feeling adrift in a group. If you have ever refused a request and subsequently felt remorseful later, you have experienced this contradiction. You browse the photographs of the function, faces beaming, lights shining, and a tiny piece of you murmurs, "Perhaps I ought to have attended." Yet the reality is, inside, you understood it wouldn't have seemed right. Not due to your lack of fitting in, but because you would have been present in physique, not in psyche. You would have been ticking off the moments until departing seemed polite. You would have grinned through fatigue. That isn't inclusion. That's endurance. Scientists studying emotional attunement found that certain people possess what is termed high sensory processing sensitivity. These persons handle inputs, visions, noises, feelings more profoundly than the average. Populated environments can inundate them. Discussions overlapping tunes, bright flickers, perpetual movement. It isn't merely distracting, it's agonizing. Their minds literally record more data per second. To shield themselves, they retreat. Shunning, therefore, isn't invariably dysfunction. Sometimes it's wisdom. It's the physique stating, "This setting is too clamorous for my spirit." However, culture rarely grasps that. We exist in a reality that prizes extroversion. We applaud the boisterous, the charismatic, the ones who master the room. We view isolation as a defect, quietness as discomfort, and introspection as frailty. Individuals shunning social functions often mature being told, "You must be more expressive, don't be so reserved, or you're letting life pass you by." Yet what if avoiding clamor is how they find purpose? What if their silence is not an issue but a choice? There's a more profound psychological aspect also, the connection between self-perception and social conduct. Numerous socially withdrawn people have passed years in settings where they seemed unseen or misinterpreted. In time, the brain creates a link. Being near people means emotional distress. The unconscious recalls exclusion the same way the physique recalls agony. Thus, when someone invites them somewhere, their brain doesn't just perceive a warm event, it perceives a potential recurrence of criticism. It's not shunning individuals, it's shunning emotional reenactment. Still, the most fascinating thing about these individuals is that they are frequently the most emotionally astute ones in the space. When they decide to enter it, they heed more than they talk. They perceive specifics others miss. Their compassion is profound, but so is their dread of depletion. It's as if they carry a flame that shines brighter than most, but dissolves quicker too. Each social meeting expends energy, and they gauge that expense cautiously. This, however, doesn't imply they're fated to isolation. Truly, many socially withdrawn individuals thrive in one-on-one relationships. They excel in secure settings where they can be genuine without pretense. Research shows that introverts and socially nervous individuals frequently succeed in long-term relationships because they invest profoundly once they trust. They may not attend every function, but when they do present for you, emotionally, mentally, it's genuine. Nonetheless, we can't overlook the isolation that sometimes comes with this habit. Shunning social functions may protect from overload, but it can also separate from possibility. We are wired for inclusion. Even the most reflective souls need to feel part of something larger than themselves. The difficulty rests in locating environments that seem secure enough to engage without self-betrayal. For some, that could mean intimate groups, common interests, significant customs. It's not about mandating social conduct, it's about reinterpreting it. In recent years, experts have identified something called social fatigue. It's the emotional exhaustion that follows extended social exposure. You may observe it after a day of meetings or after hours at a function. That faint feeling of insensibility, as if your feelings have been pulled too taut. For profoundly sensitive individuals, that weariness lands sooner. It's not sudden, it's incremental. A grin becomes heavy, mirth turns hollow, and abruptly, you just crave quiet. Not because you're sorrowful, but because you need to regain equilibrium. Individuals who shun social gatherings frequently build complex routines around this. They may come late and exit early. They may offer assistance in the kitchen, not to flee people, but to have a purpose to move away from the focus. They may browse on their phone between discussions, not from apathy, but to briefly withdraw into control. These minor behaviors are adaptive mechanisms, methods of handling the unseen stress of social vitality. And here's something we seldom discuss. Shunning isn't invariably a sign of frailty. At times, it's a type of sagacity. Knowing your boundaries, acknowledging your needs, respecting your internal system, that's emotional acumen in motion. The issue isn't that they shun, it's that they criticize themselves for doing so. We've been conditioned that being social means being successful. But what if being self-understanding is the real success? Nonetheless, balance counts. Because complete isolation, while pleasant at first, slowly turns into a void. The human psyche requires mirrors, people who reflect parts of us we can't see alone. Development happens in connection, even if that connection is silent or infrequent. Thus, the true objective for those who shun social events isn't to become extroverts. It's to find methods of being social without self-negation. You can begin modestly, a coffee with one reliable friend, a stroll with someone who accepts silence, a digital community where you can talk on your own terms. Interacting doesn't have to equal parties or noise. It can equal resonance. It can equal mutual gaze, collective mirth, profound presence. What individuals who shun social events truly seek is not solitude. It's genuineness. They aren't concealing from others. They're seeking something authentic enough to come out for. And at times, they just require others to grasp that, to not interpret their absence personally, to realize that when they state, "I am unable to make it," it's not refusal, it's regulation. They're not declining people, they're affirming peace. It's a silent kind of bravery, the kind that isn't celebrated but merits it, since it takes strength to stand against the force of compliance, to respect your emotional capacity in a world that idolizes overstimulation. The mindset of people who shun social events isn't a narrative of dread. It's a narrative of emotional economy. Every engagement has a price, and they've simply realized how to spend their energy where it counts most. Occasionally, the hardest thing for people who shun social events isn't declining. It's enduring the echo of that refusal, the remorse that follows, the silent wondering if they've let someone down, if they've shut another door without meaning to. They review the moment in their heads, attempting to justify it. I simply needed room. I felt weary. Perhaps next time. But inside, they know this isn't solely about one function. It is a habit, a cadence their life keeps falling into. Interaction beckons and stillness answers. What most individuals don't grasp is that shunning isn't born in maturity. It commences much earlier. Perhaps it started when a youth felt invisible in a room full of individuals. Maybe they were the listener in a boisterous family or the silent companion in a group of talkers. They discovered that being still was more secure than being boisterous. That observing was simpler than joining. In time, that stillness turned into identity. They didn't cease showing up. They just ceased being completely present. Psychologically, this fosters what experts call emotional suppression, the inclination to stifle expression to prevent unease. It's not about dread of others. It's about security within oneself. Yet here's the lovely reality. Individuals who shun social gatherings frequently possess extraordinary inner worlds. Their isolation gives birth to ingenuity, contemplation, and compassion that can't flourish in perpetual noise. They are the philosophers, the watchers, the scribes, the silent stabilizers who maintain balance in a turbulent world. Their silence isn't a void. It's the area where significance develops. However, when they remain too long there, that same area can turn into a prison, one constructed from rumination, self-questioning, and perceived criticism. Psychology terms this the avoidance loop. The more an individual shuns a discomfort, the more potent that discomfort gets. Each refusal feels like reprieve in the moment, but reinforces the link between socializing and strain. It's similar to shutting a window to block the noise out, but soon the atmosphere grows stagnant. Disrupting that loop isn't about mandating social engagement. It's about altering what it represents. Instead of viewing social functions as vitality drains, they can become trials in personal expression, minor opportunities to extend without breaking. One of the most misinterpreted attributes of people who shun social settings is that they often possess high self-perception. They observe the micro changes in their physique, the constricting chest before walking into a room, the short breath before talking, the pulse rate when focus turns their way. That perception, if undeveloped, turns inward and becomes self-consciousness. Yet, with application, it can transform into emotional regulation. The solution isn't to silence perception, it's to ground it. Grounding methods from measured breathing, sensory concentration, brief mantras, remind the brain, "I am secure." Because a large part of social shunning isn't about people. It's about the physique remembering moments it didn't feel secure. Still, the paradox is many individuals who shun social events are some of the most emotionally giving individuals you'll ever encounter. They care profoundly. They recall details. They inquire unobtrusively. They show care in ways that go unseen. They just have difficulty with the stage of life, the part that requires performance. For them, affection isn't boisterous. It's the brief text at midnight, the considerate action, the way they heed without interjecting. Their bond isn't forged in the throng, it's created in the silent moments no one else sees. There's also an evolutionary psychology perspective to this. Not everyone is built to be the focus of the tribe. In archaic social units, equilibrium was key. Some pursued game, some collected, some protected. The ones who favored observation often identified threats, perceived emotional tensions, noticed designs others missed. Their silence was endurance. Today, that same perceptiveness translates differently. It might mean sensing tone shifts in discussion or assessing the mood of a room too rapidly. When all specifics hit at once, the mind withdraws to silence as a defense mechanism. The current world doesn't make that easy. It prizes visibility. If you're not connecting, posting, or acting, it seems like you're lagging. But the reality is, social shunning isn't indolence. It's defiance against overstimulation. It's the physique's method of stating, I refuse to dilute my peace merely to be seen. Nonetheless, peace and development must coexist, because excess peace becomes insensibility and excess isolation becomes self-negation. The objective isn't to battle the need for quiet, it's to locate connection that doesn't shatter it. In counseling, there's a notion called graduated exposure. It implies taking minor, controllable steps toward what seems uncomfortable, not to remove perceptiveness, but to expand tolerance. For someone who shuns social gatherings, that might mean being present for 15 minutes, then exiting guilt-free. It could mean phoning a companion instead of meeting in person. The aim isn't to mandate change. It's to prove to the nervous system that connection doesn't invariably mean peril. Gradually, the body internalizes a new story. I can handle this. Yet let's delve deeper. Why does it seem so emotionally burdensome to simply be near others sometimes? Because social environments mirror us back. Every engagement reveals something about who we think we are. When someone chuckles and we don't know why, we feel detached. When people bond over mutual energy, we feel out of sync. That dissonance highlights us of our internal separation, the void between the persona we display and the self we are. The more genuine a person is, the wider that void can seem in settings built on shallow connection. So the shunning, in many respects, is a rejection to fragment. It's saying, I won't divide myself just to belong. That isn't disorder, that's integrity. But integrity can be isolating. Because the culture often misinterprets stillness for absence, the people who shun social events aren't invariably missing. They're just elsewhere, restoring their emotional vitality, thinking profoundly about things no one asked them to think about. They're reviewing conversations, dissecting meaning, wondering if they were comprehended or if they transgressed. They exist in the aftertaste of engagement. Long after the function is over, their minds are still there, organizing, handling, contemplating. That's the price of perception. Yet in that same profundity lies elegance. Because when they do connect, it's profound. Their discussions feel like shelter. Their focus feels hallowed. You don't need to battle for their interest. When they're with you, they're genuinely with you. They offer what most social butterflies can't: focused presence. They don't jump from person to person. They anchor into significance. They're not pursuing validation. They're seeking resonance. For a lot of them, recovery begins with redefining solitude, not as retreat, but as a tool. You can adore quiet and still desire connection. You can relish isolation without vanishing. Equilibrium isn't discovered in perpetual exposure. It's found in understanding when to advance and when to withdraw. When you begin to see your own habits without criticism, shunning becomes perception. You commence to make decisions, not out of dread, but out of harmony. The world doesn't require everyone to be boisterous. It requires listeners. It requires the people who sense the temperature of a space before anyone speaks. It requires the ones who say less, but mean more. Social shunning, when comprehended, can evolve into social sagacity, the capacity to engage profoundly, not frequently. because profundity, not noise, is what fosters real human bonding. And maybe that's the concealed reality behind this entire mindset. The individuals who shun social events aren't refusing the world. They're yearning for a version of it that feels genuine. A world where they don't have to strain themselves into manageable bits just to fit in. A world where silence isn't uncomfortable, where mutual gaze replaces trivial chatter, where emotion is permitted to breathe. Until they find that world, they construct it in their isolation. And sometimes that's the most authentic kind of living there is. Since one day, when they do walk into a room again, they'll do it differently. They'll no longer be attempting to assimilate. They'll simply appear, silent, anchored, whole. And the individuals who notice them will feel it. That aura that doesn't require attention. That tranquility that doesn't seek approval. That is the power of those who once shunned. They return with depth. And perhaps that's the teaching for all of us. Bonding doesn't commence in the throng. It commences in isolation, in learning yourself profoundly enough to show up as someone real. When you comprehend your own silence, you at last have something worth saying. When you respect your own space, you at last have room to let others in. The people who shun social events aren't damaged. They're constructing the kind of peace that makes real connection possible. And when they at last do connect, it's not pretense, it's truth.